Hey folks, today I'm going to be doing the Q&A video that I introduced a couple weeks ago to celebrate 500 subscribers. This is going to be a little bit of a long video, so I'm going to answer the questions and then announce the giveaway winner at the end. So if you guys want to skip the questions and just go to the giveaway, totally understandable, but yeah, settle in and we'll do some questions. So the first one comes from Joseph Francis Burton, and he asks, who is your favorite author from New Mexico or your favorite book about the area? So I've been outed. I'm from New Mexico, and Joseph is from the Jemez area, so that's what's up. But I do have to say that my favorite author from the area is a poet and writer named Jimmy Santiago Baca. So his stories are generally about growing up in Albuquerque in particular, and how that environment, just kind of growing up in these harsh, unforgiving desert environments, kind of reflects in the character of the people, but you know, that they can also be harsh and unforgiving, but also like what are the elements and qualities about people that can be also very loving and very forgiving. I don't know, it's a little bit tricky to explain, but I would love to read you guys some of his poetry sometime. And Joseph, I would love to hear what your thoughts are on that as well. I know you said you kind of a love-hate relationship with artists from here, so I would love to hear your thoughts. Knowledge Lost asks, I would love to know more about your musical influences, since I'm sure Black Flag is in there somewhere. And yes, if you guys don't know, the logo that I have for my channel for ChallengeThyShelf is Black Flag's logo that has been turned into books. And yeah, they were pretty influential to me growing up. I didn't really kind of come into punk music until kind of mid-20s, but they were definitely one of those starter pack bands for me, and was sort of a gateway to bands like Circle Jerks and The Germs and Bad Brains, who had been on my radar for a little while, but also Death, and just kind of, I ended up doing this deep dive into some really phenomenal punk bands, and the Minutemen was one of those as well. So they're just one of those bands that I think once you kind of hear them, and if you're a person who gravitates to that kind of music, like it's in you forever. So, but yeah, I'll talk more about that in an upcoming video too, but yeah, definitely some influences there. Roberto Pastore asks, I see you have some vinyl over there behind you. So my question is, do you listen to music when you read? And if so, what is your favorite reading music or music to read to? I don't listen to music when I read. I can't read and also listen to or pay attention to music. Like those two just can't occupy my brain space at the same time. But I do like listening to like ambient music or soundscapes. So I mentioned in a previous video that Harry Potter, like ASMR music, or not music, but ASMR is something that I listen to quite a bit when I read, mostly just because it is white noise. And there's nothing exceptional about that. Like ASMR as a thing, I don't think really works on me. But I do just kind of like the soundscapes. I guess the most like music I can listen to is like Brian Eno's ambient music, like that also works, that fits the bill. So that's something that I'll also listen to. Ollie Bliss asks, you have an arty aesthetic with your channel, which I love. Thank you. Who/what have you been influenced by? So that's a very loaded question, which I could make a whole video about, and probably will. But I think just generally, my influences come from a lot of different places. So photography, film, music videos, and music also, but photographers, and I'll talk more about these folks in depth, but I just want to mention them here. So Gregory Crewdson is a huge photographic influence. He just does these very large cinematic shoots where he manipulates light in the most incredible way. Alex Webb, who is a photographer, also just has this really playful aesthetic with light and color, which is just astounding. So definitely go check his work out too. And then conflict photographers and war photographers, James Nachtway being my favorite. And there's something about conflict photographers that the images are very hard to process, but there's just this, the way they capture movement is something that is really, really inspiring. It's a incredibly special technique all its own. So again, I'll talk more about those folks. But as far as film directors are concerned, Andrei Tarkovsky, huge influence. Oh, Kurosawa, huge influence too to me. Jean-Luc Godard and Pedro Almodovar. I was also one of those kids that grew up in front of the television. So like I had the good fortune of like being an MTV kid and being on the cusp of like really lo-fi kind of like music video production, and then kind of transitioning into these more produced, more kind of refined music videos. So yeah, music videos were a huge influence for an aesthetic that I have. And I'll mention one of my favorite music videos, that is Lotus Flower by Radiohead, which I just think is so brilliant in a lot of different ways. Eclectic Reads asks, your thumbnails are fantastic. Thank you. Is photography something you do professionally or as a hobby? Definitely a hobby. But I think also more my interest lies in editing. So I'm getting a lot more comfortable with film editing, and just kind of want to stretch my legs as far as like video and photography is concerned. So that's kind of where my interest is right now. Sayani Reads has a lot of questions. So her questions are, what's your favorite food? What do you do for work? How is your hair so great? So thank you. We'll address those three. My favorite food is pasta, any and all kinds of pasta. The work question I'll address with the next person's question. How is your hair so great? I have naturally curly hair, so it's just, part of it is genetics, and part of it is a couple of products that are kind of my go-to. So the product Davines, I think it is. There's a medium hold hair product that I use, and also like a curl serum that I use. So usually I'll just kind of rub that through my hair when it's half between being wet and dry, and then I'll just kind of finger curl my hair to kind of like get it in the right shape. And then so those I kind of use on and off, but my go-to #1 hair product that I use is coconut oil. So I'll just warm some of that up and kind of distribute it evenly in my hair, just to kind of help keep the dryness, and it doesn't frizz too much in the desert because it's so dry here, but the dryness, and my hair gets very brittle, and so that's what I usually use. I'll use it all over my skin too, because again, it's super ridiculously dry here. But yeah, that's what I use. Nothing crazy. She also asks, have you seen the movie Book Club? And if so, would you choose Don Johnson or Andy Garcia? Andy Garcia, all the way. I haven't seen the movie, but he's more my bag. What's your favorite book as a child? She asks. Do you have friends you talk to about books, and what do you recommend to people? My favorite book as a child was The Witches by Roald Dahl. Do you have friends you talk to about books? Yes. I've always been very lucky to have people who care about books and the written word and writing in my life. So not so much as a kid when I was growing up, but in my teen years and adulthood, I've been very fortunate to have people that I I talk to quite a bit about books. And do I have a book that I recommend to people? Not a blanket book recommendation. Usually with recommendations, what I like to do is just kind of, this sounds bad, but like size people up or just kind of get more of an idea of what they like to read and then make recommendations from there. So, and Amelia Root asks, I would like to know what your profession is and if you've ever moved and where have you lived before. So answering Siani's question about work also, I am a critical care nurse. I work currently in a burn and surgical and trauma unit in my city. So that is what I do for work. It is very physically and emotionally exhausting, but it's very rewarding work. And if you guys are ever like wondering why I suck so bad at responding to comments, that's why. I work nights and I, am there 13 to 14 hours a day, usually 3 days a week. So that's what I do for work.
It's just nursing. You must be so tired and sad.
She also asks, where have you lived, or if I've moved, or where have I lived before? So a lot of years were spent when I was growing up in Santa Monica, California. That was kind of my stomping ground. So I loved it. I loved being near water. I loved being near a beach. I loved being in a bigger city. But since then, we moved back here when I was in 5th grade, I think, just so we could be closer to family. And then later, just for a very short stint, I went to Maine to farm with a good friend who owned a pretty awesome family farm there. So it was really amazing. And even though I wasn't there for a very long time, it was really such a treasured experience in my life. So I'm glad I got to experience that, even if it was for a very short amount of time. Valentina Garcia asks, how did you discover BookTube? Your favorite nonfiction book and a favorite poetry collection? So I discovered BookTube when I was searching for an audiobook. Sometimes on YouTube they have like free audiobook narrations, and I like to fall asleep to those sometimes, especially if they're books that I have already read before. So I was looking for one of those and stumbled across Better Than Food book reviews, which is kind of anomalous. Usually I think when people find BookTube, you kind of have to go through the gatekeepers that are the YA booktubers, and so it takes a little digging through that wall to be able to find adult booktubers. But somehow in that search, I sort of subverted the YA people. But yeah, I didn't find out about like the bigger booktubers until a lot later. So I guess I kind of lucked out in that arena. Favorite nonfiction book is My Own Country by Abraham Verghese. I talked about this book before. So it was telling his experience of being a doctor in a rural part of the United States during the AIDS crisis, so between the late 80s and 90s, and how this experience sort of differed slightly from that of the big like all the attention that was being given to New York and California, who, those places were being hit hardest in terms of numbers, but also how there was this large contingent of people in Middle America that were being affected by the AIDS crisis that didn't have as great access to education or resources to kind of control what was happening. And so him being an infectious disease doctor and just trying to help people in this community with education, with resources, with medication, anything. And it kind of focused more on the care providers and also people that just didn't identify as being a potential population that would be affected by AIDS. And so really fascinating book, really wonderful. And then poetry collection. So unfortunately, I don't read as much poetry as I would like to. But my favorite collections, it was kind of a toss-up between What Matters Most Is How Well You Walk Through Fire by Charles Bukowski and Love is a Dog from Hell by Charles Bukowski. So those two, out of the two, I think as a collection, Love is a Dog from Hell won out. But my favorite poem, incidentally, is contained in What Matters Most Is How Well You Walk Through Fire. And Bruno asks, if you could go back in time, what book do you wish you could give your teenage self and why? This is a fantastic question. And for that, I went with Discourse in Selected Writings by Epictetus. The reason I chose this was because I feel like I wish Stoicism would have played a much larger role in my life as a teenager and in my early 20s. And while I would never take back the years that I affectionately call my Bukowski years, where I was just this drunken mess for a lot of my early 20s, I think that maybe having Stoicism as something that I paid closer attention to or exercised more would have better equipped me to deal with things in my life that I just didn't have any control over, and understanding that I play a role in my own suffering, and that I didn't need to waste so much time being angry and resentful about things that I didn't have any control over, and instead be able to redirect some of that energy into things that mattered, that would have served me and served other people in a more effective way. But it's not too late, so I think I'll probably pick up a copy of that and do some deep dives into that. So this is a great question. Buzz Sellis asks, do you have any books that you would like to see made into movies? Not generally. I get pretty defensive and protective about books that I like being made into movies or shows. And so I am not a huge advocate of that. But, and generally I kind of shy away from movies and shows that have been turned into, that kind of derive their source material from books. Although I'm kind of shifting my perspective on that a little bit, and you know, there have been some really great adaptations that I want to look further into. So that's actually one of the reasons that I really wanted to do the book to film club that Adam at Memento Mori set up, because I think it's nice to see people who actually care about protecting that source material making movies out of it. So yeah, again, generally not a huge advocate of it, but I'm open to it. Molly Rose asks, what made you decide to start a channel? And probably the same reason a lot of people start channels, in that they see a deficiency somewhere with what they're seeing on BookTube. So I think that's a lot of the reason why people kind of choose to make channels, is that they're not seeing either books being discussed in a manner that they see fit, or that they're not seeing books that they really love and enjoy. And so I think that that's kind of a wonderful thing about this community, is that so many different people can add to that conversation and have a really unique perspective and point of view. So yeah, I think that's why I started a channel. Lillian Nieswender asks, do you ever read the classics? And if so, who is your favorite author? This is so funny. So the video that I made at the beginning of the year talking about BookTube goals, I had identified reading more classics as one of my goals. And in that, I was like, oh yeah, you know, I've read some classics. I don't think I have too big a deficiency in my classics. Absolutely wrong. I have huge gaping holes in my knowledge of classics. So when I was in high school, I took a Latin class and we read the Aeneid and the Iliad, and it was all, so I have some knowledge base there. And also when I was studying theater, we did a whole lot of studying of Greek tragedies and comedies and some, you know, of course, like some Shakespeare and so, but I just like my literary classics definitely lack. I've only read one Jane Austen novel, which is Emma. I really want to read more Thomas Hardy because he seems to be like a universally loved author on BookTube. I hear so many of my favorite booktubers love his work. And but for now, I'd say my favorite classics author is Oscar Wilde. When I listened to the audiobook of A Picture of Dorian Gray, I absolutely fell in love with it, and would love to look more into his work. So that's it as of now. But if you have any suggestions of other authors to check out, I have some on the list that I want to read, and I've got some books sitting on my shelf that I need to pick up. But yeah, any help you can offer in that area, I would love. Joe Smith asks, I always like to know what booktubers have seen of the world or want to. So what are your favorite countries / places you visited? And where or what would you love to see / visit in a bucket list kind of way? So also not as well traveled as I would like. I've been places that I've loved, but I think that Paris, France has been hands down my favorite place I've been to, and mostly because of just the amount of museums and culture that exists in that city. It's unbelievable to me. Like I spent an entire day at the Pompidou. I went back after the first day of visiting and just spent time in the library. And I'm so floored that there's this beautiful library right next to this incredible museum, and that people study next door to Jackson Pollock paintings and Francis Bacon paintings and like Otto Dix paintings, and just it's mind-blowing that these resources exist. I would love to go back. I spent 9 days there, and it definitely wasn't enough. So I love Paris. And then a bucket list place is I really would like to see the Hagia Sophia in Istanbul. So it's a mosque that was converted into a museum, and just as an idea and as a piece of architecture, it's such a magical thing to exist. And I think that I'm not a religious person, but I feel like it's impossible to enter a place like that and not somehow feel close to God. So that's a place I would really love to see before I die. MCS Books asks, if you had to dedicate the rest of your life to studying one thing, what would it be? Either a topic, an object, an idea, anything. He also asks, what would be the most ideal topic for a collection of essays for you, and in what style would you prefer them to be written in? So the one thing I could dedicate myself to studying or doing for the rest of my life is ensuring access to medications for people that need them the most. And the way that I kind of would combat this is through intelligence patents. So as it exists right now, every medication that's developed has a 20-year intelligence patent attached to it, meaning that these medications can't be reproduced at a lesser cost, or generic versions can't be produced until 20 years of this medication existing. So basically what this translates to is pharmaceutical companies being able to make the maximum amount of profit that they can off of these inventions, if you will, for 20 years. So what I would like to do is to lower that timeline on the intelligence patents, either by 10 years or 5 years. And what this would do is allow these medications to be produced at a lower cost so that the most amount of people can get access to them. As it exists right now, like people in Africa can't have access to AZT or HIV/AIDS medications as readily just because of the exorbitant expense that is attached to that particular treatment. And so this just means that places that can't afford it, or countries that can't afford it, are essentially 20 years behind in terms of their treatment and being able to stay on top of that, those diseases and those illnesses. So yeah, and also making sure that distribution and allocation of those medications is a little more fair. So again, in Africa, like people who are on palliative care for advanced stage in cancer don't have access to pain medication. So they're trying to control these really awful, painful diseases with things like Tylenol and Toradol and things that are just anti-inflammatory, versus things that are very effective, like opioids, which we are having a incredible crisis in America right now. So lots of different factors play into that opioid crisis, but I think if we're just able to kind of distribute resources in a more effective and fair way, that would really just benefit a lot of people. And then as far as a essay collection, I think it would be really interesting to kind of like identify successful people or people who are accomplished in these various ways, and to try to track down some letters or cards from like graduations or weddings or anything, to see those pieces of advice that people gave to them during those years, and then to kind of follow them and see if those pieces of advice were taken or rejected and how it affected their success. Yeah, and it would be great to see it in like a video essay or a documentary of some sort. So that's what I would choose for that. Also, great question. Rashmika Likes Books asks, if you were a type of food, what would you be? Also, how do you feel about translated fiction? How do you feel about poetry? So if I was a type of food, something gelatinous like flan or creme brulee, something like that, or budino. I love those like kind of custardy sort of gelatinous desserts, which texture-wise I think kind of turn people off a little bit, but then maybe later on becomes their favorite dessert. I don't know what that says about me as a person. And then also translated fiction, yes. Poetry, yes. So Celia asks, can you share a bookish memory from your childhood with us? What is your favorite book from your childhood, and why do you consider it a favorite? Also, she asks, if you could go anywhere in time and space, where would you go? So my favorite childhood book was The Witches by Roald Dahl, and my favorite bookish memory from my childhood is the day that I went to get that book. So a very dear family friend of ours who really encouraged my sister and I to read took us to a bookstore one day and let us pick out any one thing that we wanted, which was really special because up until that point, I don't think we'd ever really shopped for books, and we were my grandmother took us to the library a lot, but yeah, we never had the resources to really buy books. And so to have that be something that we did was just super special. And I remember like the feeling of just being able to spend time like perusing through books and like deliberately selecting one that you could take home and that you would own and that you would have. Was so cool. And it's funny, I don't think that ever went away. I don't think that feeling of, you know, just spending time in a bookstore and how special that was, and that you were surrounded by all this knowledge and all this talent and all this writing. You know, I didn't think about that when I was young, but there was something just that resonated so strongly with me about being able to like thumb through things and take your time and choose something that you are really gonna love and enjoy. And I still have that copy to this day. Like it's sitting on my shelf. It's the one book that I've had almost my entire life. So I love it. And then she asked if you could go anywhere in time and space, where would you go? And I think I would like to see the Big Bang. I think that would be the thing that would transcend time and space, is to be there when this occurrence happened, and what was the event that created all of this. Very stoner thing to want to do. Alex asks, if you could get any literary inspired tattoo, what would it be and why? And where would you place it on yourself? So the image that I would get is the last page of The Giving Tree. So after the tree had been cut down and it was just this lopsided, sort of defeated stump, with initials carved in it. But it's such an effective illustration to me, because I think it serves as a reminder, or would serve as a reminder, that after life takes all it can from you and you feel defeated and reduced, that there's still something left that's of substance and that's useful. And I just love this image of this half thing, or this reduced thing that has all these markings of love, of relationships, this very like potent physical manifestation of all the things that it has given. And I love it so much. And I think I would place it just right on the forearm, in between the upper forearm, just right below the crook of the elbow. I think that's such an elegant place for tattoos. I know it's kind of a basic place for tattoos, but all the ones that I've seen there that are sort of small or linear, I think are so wonderful. And I think also something that's pretty easily visible to yourself if that's what you wanted. So that's where I would place it, and that's what I would get. So a couple of honorable mention questions here. Adam at Memento Mori asked a non-bookish question. What are your favorite 5 albums of the last 10 years, preferably that you own on vinyl? And Adam, I'm sorry, I'm not going to answer that here. Instead, I'm going to make an entirely separate video answering that question, because it would occupy an entire video and it deserves its own video. So I apologize, I'm not going to answer it here, but you're going to get your own video for that question. Also, separate videos I want to make. Celia asked a question attached to hers of what are your top 5 movies and or directors and why? Again, warrants its own video, so I'm going to talk more about that in tandem with Ollie Bliss's question about what are your artistic influences. So those are all going to get their own separate videos, because I think that I can just talk for a really long time about that. So that's what I have for the question and answer portion. Those were incredibly good questions, and thank you all for everyone who left one. So now we're going to do the giveaway part. I've got my very high-tech system here of choosing a winner. So we'll get one of these, and I have Shaun from Eclectic Reads. Ta-da! So Shaun, congratulations. And do me a solid, my email and my Instagram are linked in the description box. Just go ahead and send me a message and let me know where you would like the book sent. And I will send that out. Tomorrow's the 4th of July, so there's not going to be any post. But I'll send it out after the weekend. My best friend's getting married on Saturday, so that's going on too. Everything's just like really busy this week. But I'm gonna send that just when the post schedule is a little more regular. So I hope you guys have a great day, and you can look forward to some more videos from this question and answer, and also some more I've got coming down the pipeline. So thank you guys again for watching. Thank you for participating in this. This was really fun. And yeah, I'll see you guys very soon. Have a great day. Bye.